Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, I'm so grateful you're here. Now, I talk a lot on this podcast about the concept of buffering, which is essentially when we try to change our emotional landscape with something outside of us. For example, you feel lonely, so instead of feeling lonely, you eat something to feel differently. Maybe you feel bored. So rather than feel bored, you pick up your cell phone and start scrolling social media mindlessly. Maybe when you're stressed or uncomfortable in a situation, you reach for alcohol to feel something other than stressed and uncomfortable. The problem with buffering is really twofold. Number one, it distracts us from the truth of our life. And number two, it has long-term consequences. Buffering with alcohol has some really unique consequences, especially, I believe, for the perimenopausal and menopausal populations, which is largely the group that I work with. I can't tell you how many women I have worked with over the years who have struggled to improve their relationship with alcohol, even though they desperately want to. Now, about a year and a half ago, I hosted an event called Confident Women Rising, where I invited 20 thought leaders in the space of women's health to share their insights on developing confidence. And Veronica Valli was one of those thought leaders. Veronica is changing the narrative on sobriety. With 21 years of sobriety, and 19 years of experience as a recovery coach and psychotherapist, she really understands that there is no one path to sobriety. Veronica has authored several books, including Why You Drink and How to Stop, Get Sober, Get Free, and she has a new book coming out this month called Soberful. She's also the co-host of the Soberful podcast and creator of successful online recovery programs. Veronica has helped thousands of women improve their relationship with alcohol and transform their lives. Personally, I adore her. I adore her message and her mission, and I cannot wait for you to tune in to this conversation that we recently had. So Veronica, welcome back to the Grace and Grit podcast.
It's great to be here, Courtney. Great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see you. And you have been a busy bee. You have gotten through a pandemic, raising children, running a business, and writing a book.
I know. Isn't it crazy? Yeah. I just was thinking the other day, like when it all started, the lockdown, because that's how we met through your summit last year. It just seemed like, God, the days and the weeks were so long. We had no idea, how it was going to be. And now it's like we're at this point of it, and it's like our new normal. So yeah, I got a book deal right when everything was going down, right? Like whenever, it felt like the world was ending. And I wrote it like when everybody was in my house.
Right.
Everybody was home.
Which just goes to show, right? When you put your mind to something, regardless of the circumstances, you can make it happen.
Yeah. I was in New York at the time, and what I did to write it is I would go away in a hotel for about 3 nights on my own to just do a deep dive away from my kids and everyone. Right. And as soon as everything began to open up a little bit in New York, which was late June, I booked a hotel and did that. And it was like, I felt giddy. Like, it was like, because we hadn't been anywhere or done anything, you know? Usually you're like there's things and I, everyone was in there was maybe 20 people at the hotel, and we were all kind of like staying like 100 feet away from each other. And it was very weird. But I remember that feeling of like, this is so weird. And we were so giddy with the freedom of not being at home.
Right. Yeah.
It was really strange.
And as many things as there are that none of us enjoyed about the pandemic, it kind of is a great incubator for book writing. Right?
Yeah.
So you can't go out and do all these other things.
Yeah. There was not, because there was, for months, it felt like we have no plans. Yeah. So my husband would take the kids out like on a Saturday outside, and I could write for a few hours. So and it's coming out. It'll be out January 25th.
So let's tell the audience the name of the book. It's Soberful: Uncover a Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol. Yes. And for listeners who may be new to you, you've been on the podcast before. For those of you who are regular podcast listeners, episode 170 was your first episode here. But for those who may not be familiar with your work, let's tell them a bit about what you do. Obviously, it's in the title of the book. You're a sobriety coach.
Yeah, I help people change their relationship with alcohol. Yeah. I used to be a clinical psychotherapist in the UK. I've worked in different rehabs and treatment centers and had a private practice. And then when I came to the USA, I started working as a sober coach. It was just an easier transition. And I wanted to write a book because I see so many struggling. And there's a genre called quit lit, where there's lots of books, really great books that have been written by lots of different people. And a lot of it by people's experience of getting sober, which is very relatable. And what I wanted to do was give people the solution. I wanted to, in the first part of the book, I really kind of deconstruct our relationship with alcohol, because a lot of it is based on perception rather than reality. Yeah. And so I really kind of deconstruct that so we see it differently. And the second part of the book is a therapeutic program. It's a solution. I call it personal development for sober people. It's not that people who struggle with alcohol, everybody has to do personal development, everyone on the planet. But most people don't know that. And when you have a struggle with something, whether it's alcohol or food or can be all sorts of things, relationships, it pushes you to do some deeper work on yourself, to really know yourself. And that's what the book is about.
It's so true. And it's so clear in the book that our relationship with alcohol is a doorway of sorts into the world of personal development.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. It's not so much about quitting drinking. It's about living an expansive life. It's about becoming the person that you're meant to be. Yeah. It's about, I very much come from we hear a lot about, it was such a bad drinking problem and I had to stop and there was no other choice and it was really bad. My client group is very much in the middle. On the outside, you wouldn't think they had a problem with alcohol. They have, a degree, they have a job, they have a nice home, they go on nice vacations. Their life looks like it's together. It's on the inside that the problem occurs. It's how they feel about themselves on the inside, and they are constantly arguing with themselves about whether they are going to drink or not. And that's the kind of the clinch, the how much space it rents in your head.
Right.
Because alcohol should rent no space in your head.
Absolutely. And I also hear what you're speaking to. I always refer to this as integrity pain, when we're doing things that are out of alignment with the way we really want to be showing up. So we compromise the alcohol, and yet it really doesn't feel good in our bodies, not just chemically, but on a psychological level, it doesn't feel good because it's so out of alignment with what we truly want. And so I love that you're making this very clear that yes, you work with alcoholics, but you work with a large span of people who wouldn't classify themselves as alcoholics, but also don't like their relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, and I don't really even use the word alcoholic. That's a word that a lot of people don't identify with. I work with the people who are, just as I described, who are don't fit that definition. Don't even drink alcohol every day, but it rents too much space in their head, and it's too much. It's just taking up too much bandwidth and energy.
Absolutely.
And the reason that people have this struggle is all because of this very ingrained belief system that we all have. And we were all kind of raised in a culture that sold us the idea that alcohol is the best vehicle to have fun, excitement, belonging, connection, to relax, to reward yourself, and to get romance and sex. And we all, like, it was never presented to me when I was growing up that not drinking was an option.
Right.
Like that could be an option. So I drank because that's what adults do. And I believed I would get those things. And here's what I notice with my clients. We can get those things with alcohol, and there's always a cost.
Always.
And no one talks about the cost. So I was drinking at 14, 15, and I know I was having a fun time, crazy time with my friends, but the cost racked up pretty quickly for me. And the other thing is, when people, my client group tends to be 30s, 40s, 50s and older. When people are struggling with their relationship with alcohol, what they're trying to do is get their drinking to how it was 20, 30 years ago. Mm. That if I just kind of manage it, if I just kind of figure out the thing, if I just kind of balance it, it'll be how it was at the beginning when there didn't feel like there was many costs, or I didn't notice many costs, because that's the thing with our relationship with alcohol. As we age, the costs increase and the benefits decrease. Yes. And what happens with my clients is what we do is we do a whole process where we reveal that they're at the point that they're not getting a very good return on their investment.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about those costs, because yes, alcohol, of course, has a financial cost. I mean, we have to buy it, right? And alcohol is not cheap, but that's not really what you're referring to here. We're talking about what it's costing you in relationships and in the relationship even with yourself and all the other spaces and places it's taking, like you say, bandwidth from you.
Yeah. So you're right. Money is kind of really... It costs money, and it's not just what we spend on alcohol. It's all the associated costs, like takeout food, or you lost your jacket, or taxi fares, or missed opportunities at work. And not to mention healthcare costs.
Right.
So it's not just what we actually spend on alcohol. There's all these associated costs. But the big one for me is time, because we can get money back, but we can't get time back. Mm-hmm. And people who have a problem with alcohol, they do 4 things. They drink, they think about drinking, they think about not drinking, and they recover from drinking. And that takes up time, takes up quite hours of your week, which... we can't get those hours back. And that's the bit where we have to ask ourselves, is the hours and the energy I'm spending arguing with myself about whether I'm going to have a drink or not tonight, is it worth it? And then you have the costs of, and for me, these were the big ones, my dignity, what you said, being out of alignment. I wasn't true to who I really was. This isn't the life I came here to lead, yet I am doing these things. It's integrity. It's the impact on relationships. It impacts all of my relationships. Yeah. Those costs were huge. And those are the hidden costs that we don't think about. The thing that we're very good at doing in our culture is spinning what actually happened. I remember being 15 years old and going into blackout outside in a pub and waking up outside in the gutter, covered in my own vomit, with a landlord throwing a bucket of water over me. And I remember at the time thinking, this isn't right. Like, this is awful. But then everyone around me said, that was really good. You were wild. That was so fun. You were so fun that night. You were wild. And I went, oh, okay. That's what fun is. Okay. And I see people do that, massively hungover, telling like the story that it was fun. And I saw them the night before and I'm like, I'm sorry, it didn't look like fun.
Yeah.
You weren't really connected with anyone, because when you're drunk, you're in a little sort of bubble of your own, you kind of pissed off a couple of people. You looked terrible. How we rationalize drinking and being drunk, it's extraordinary the ability we have to lie to ourselves.
It's so true. And, it's interesting because at the time of recording this podcast, we're going into the holiday season, right? This isn't airing until January, but alcohol is always around us, right? It's always available. It's very normalized, as you say. And the holidays tend to be a time of year where everything is just exaggerated times 10. And there are also a lot of triggers in our midst. So I know in your book, you talk a lot about the way we use alcohol to numb emotion or to resist emotion and to not really face the truth of our emotional landscape. And I think this is a season where we are presented with a lot of family challenges, right? A lot of women, because I work primarily with women, are more overwhelmed than they are at any other time of the year, because not only are they always busy, but now they're putting all these other to-dos on their schedule to make everyone else's holiday really spectacular. Plus, like you said, the holidays, we're trying to be fun and we're trying to make it memorable. And we have this association that alcohol has to be a part of that. And so I know you and I have had this conversation before, but I think it's a conversation that is just endless, that a lot of people worry that if they do change their relationship with alcohol, they're changing their relationship with people.
That's a really good question, Courtney. And I always say to people, there's nothing like stopping drinking for finding out who your real friends are.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And there's no, I can't, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. When you stop drinking, other people around you will have a problem with that. And the reason for that is we surround ourselves with mirrors. We tend to drink with people who drink like us. Mm-hmm. So if you are the person who's saying, you know what, this just, I'm not, it doesn't agree with me, or I have a problem with it, or I'm not. And if you say that and you stop, well, what does that mean about my drinking? If we drink together and we drink similarly, so people will take your sobriety very personally. And there's a whole bit in my book about this, that the people that we meet when we stop drinking, we meet like the overnight addiction experts. So those are the people around you who all of a sudden overnight got a degree in addiction or whatever, and will tell you don't have a problem. You don't have a problem. You don't need to stop drinking. You just need to cut out 2 nights a week or something like that, because that's their expert opinion. And then you meet people like the fun police. And those are the people who are so deeply committed to the idea that alcohol equals fun and sober equals boring. They just can't wrap their head around why anyone would volunteer to never have fun for the rest of their lives. And because they care about you, and they love you, they commit themselves to persuading you to drink, because they don't want you to miss out on the fun. So we meet all these different characters because people internalize, well, what does this mean about me? And what does this mean about my drinking? And that's where we have to, perhaps have some boundaries and limit contact with people for a while, because our real friends will be like, I'll go and have coffee and a movie with you on Friday, or I'll go to yoga with you, or let's go for a walk, or whatever. The people who don't have an issue with alcohol. And much to my surprise, when I got sober, I thought everyone drank the way that I did. I discovered there was loads of people who just didn't drink, not because they had a problem, they just didn't drink, or would have a glass of wine once in a blue moon, but really didn't care either way. And it was kind of amazing to me that there was all these things you could do and people to hang out with. And that's what I mean about expansiveness. Like, I was just doing the same thing in the same town. I went to different places, but I always went to the bar and I always met the same kind of people. It was actually really boring and repetitive. So if you stop drinking, you will know. I've not had anyone, I don't think, who's had some pushback from the people around them. And that can be quite hard. And it's like, I always support my clients and say, to give this answer, say, it just doesn't agree with me anymore. It really doesn't agree with me. I don't like the way that it makes me feel.
Yeah.
Because what does someone say to that, right?
Right.
If I've said, Courtney, strawberries really don't agree with me. No, thanks.
I probably wouldn't push them on you.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting that it is going back to what you said earlier in terms of, sobriety revealing who your true friends are. If you really think about it, when you're drinking all of the time to change who you are, you're not really giving people the opportunity to get to know who you really are. So you're kind of building relationships on falsehoods.
Yeah. And I talk about that in my book as well. It really, we have defaulted to alcohol as a quick fix for many things. And we've defaulted to it very much to, if we have any difficult feelings, I hear this a lot, well, it was a really stressful day. So we choose to ingest a carcinogenic substance to numb those feelings. And that's not how human beings were designed. The reason that we do that is we just don't have tools. We just don't have tools that we should have learned when we were younger, that we didn't, that it's never too late to learn. We just don't have the tools to be able to deal with disappointment, fear, frustration, anxiety, loneliness. So we just default to alcohol as the answer to everything. I'm going to get some t-shirts printed saying we are having way more fun than you are, because I want to be a little bit provocative, because my experience of almost 22 years of sobriety. And I got sober when I was 27. So I've done all the things. I've done everything. I've done festivals and gigs and parties and vacations and weddings and all the things. And I've done them all sober. It's better. And that's the great big sober secret. Like I connect, like the conversations, the connections I have with people are infinitely deeper and richer and more meaningful than they ever were with alcohol, ever. And but my perception was different. I was the kind of person where you were my best friend in the bar and we had the best night and we had our arms around each other. And then I'd see you in the grocery store 3 days later and avoid you because I felt shame and something just didn't feel right. So everything is better sober. We haven't been told that.
Sure. Yeah. And I also see this, like you said earlier, that gateway, to personal development. When you improve your relationship with alcohol, it really invites you to improve your relationship with every vice that you have. Because we numb emotions with a lot of things.
Yeah.
We do it with food. We do it with work. We do it with social media. And, they're all basically doing the same thing. They're denying our reality and giving us a quick fix to feel something better temporarily, but it's not fixing the real problem, which is those emotions have messages for you about your life. And if we're always ignoring the messages, what do we learn?
Yeah, it's like it's not being present in our own lives. One of the things I say to clients is, fast forward to the end of your days, and let's hope you're like 101 and in good health and mental health. Look back over your life. What do you want it to have been about? Like what? Because that's the most precious thing we have is time. Do you want it to have been that you argued with yourself about whether to eat the donut or have the 2 glasses of wine tonight? Because those things are distractions. They're not the main event. And I don't want people to miss the main event. And Courtney, I'm not perfect. I'm not sitting here saying I drink green juice and blah, blah, blah. I don't drink alcohol. I don't take drugs. I don't smoke. I approach my diet and I exercise. I always would like to do more exercise. I do as much as I can with having kids and all of those kind of limits. I love to move my body. I try and go hiking and I try and eat balanced food. But I'll have a Diet Coke, I will have an ice cream, not every day and not even frequently. But I try to, I'm certainly not, I'm not perfect in my diet, but I really try and make the effort that food is a pleasure and it also nurtures my body. And if I do have something that's a food that's not good for us, that's in small amounts in moderation.
Absolutely. And I always tell my clients, it's not so much about the what, it's about the why behind the what. So if you're deciding to have a chocolate cupcake, that can be an awesome choice if you like your reasons for eating the cupcake, which if it's to change your emotional landscape because you just don't want to feel something right now, you're probably not going to like your reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also see another t-shirt in your future. Do not miss the main event.
I love that.
That t-shirt.
Yes. Do not miss the main event. I'm writing that down. I love it.
Awesome. Okay. So earlier you said, and I agree with you so much on this, that people just aren't equipped with the tools to travel a different path, right? Because again, we have normalized alcohol to such a degree. And we're missing these tools from our tool bag. And so you invite readers to consider these 5 pillars to help improve our relationship with alcohol. Will you just sort of tell us what those 5 pillars are? The first one, of course, is one of my favorites.
Thank you. Yes. So the 5 pillars, I put them together from all of my 20 years experience as a therapist and being a sober person, as I wanted to frame just a very simple personal development program, because we can't live our lives every day staying away from a drink one day at a time, or like, we don't want to think about alcohol. We don't it doesn't exist. We just want to live our lives. Mm-hmm. But we do need a program, something, a structure to frame all of that in. So the 5 pillars are movement, connection, balance, process, and growth. Mm-hmm. And I'll break those down a little bit more. Movement is in 2 ways. And the number one thing is to move your body, as you know, is the best thing that we know it's that we have to do that for our physical health, but the research is overwhelming in that it's the best thing to do for our mental health. I mean, there's extraordinary benefits. If we have damaged our brains through alcohol or drug use, movement helps repair our brains. It's the best treatment for depression. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. So if you drink, you're going to experience depression. Just moving and I'm just, I tell people, I'm not asking you to join CrossFit and do an Ironman. Just walk briskly for 30 minutes most days with your headphones on. So it's absolutely movement is a pillar of sobriety. And, it's that I'm worth this time. I value myself to take this 30 minutes or whatever. And it's also about being conscious what we move towards and what we move away from. Mm-hmm. Because when we struggle with alcohol, we tend to sort of we drift a bit. We just tend to stay in a bit of a holding pattern. Mm-hmm. So movement is about being conscious and aware of, I want to move away from this kind of lifestyle and I want to move towards that kind of lifestyle. Again, it's not about perfection. It's about moving towards.
I love that. I just want to say that I always hear, one of the things I'm always telling my clients is that, health is a direction, not a destination. And that's what I hear in this. It's like you're choosing intentional direction, realizing that sometimes you're going to get off course with that direction. That's normal. That's life. Yeah. And, when you're lost in the woods, you don't sit down and pitch a big fit about being lost in the woods. You just look at your compass and you get yourself realigned.
Yeah. It's exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah. And which takes off the pressure. It's not, I love that approach. It's not about getting this perfect. It's about moving towards just being on the path. You will stumble. Everyone does. You may go on a little, detour. Everyone does. But just keep getting back to the path and moving in the direction. So connection is that we all have to have meaningful connection in our lives. We have to have people who know our souls. So having a drink problem, a lot of my clients experience loneliness and feel very disconnected from the people around them. And they may be around people a lot, but they feel that nobody really knows who they really are. There's a lot of shame, that kind of stuff. So connection is about really allowing ourselves to be known. So showing up, allowing people to know us. And there's only one pathway to connection, and that's through vulnerability. Yeah. And we have a big fear of vulnerability. And that's why, I have a subscription group, Soberful Life. And there's also loads of other, AA is one, but then there's stuff like Women for Sobriety, Refuge Recovery. There's lots of sober support groups out there. And those are places where you don't have to pretend. Mm-hmm. You don't go there and pretend everything's fine. So it's about being real. And it's the realness that allows people to really connect with us, because authentic connection, there's nothing else like it in the whole world. We all need this. This is universal. This isn't just for people struggling with an alcohol problem. We all need meaningful connection. Mm-hmm. Then the next pillar is balance. Whatever the question is, balance is always the answer. And it's about recognizing and balancing our needs. So as circumstances change, how we meet our needs changes. So we have, like career needs, we have family needs, health needs, personal needs, all of that kind of stuff. So, before I had kids, I had loads of time to see my friends and exercise, and I was always going off and doing a workshop or a weekend thing. And then when I had kids, I wasn't able to do any of that, but I still had the needs. So instead of going to the gym for an hour 5 times a week, that wasn't possible for me. So I would walk with a stroller around the park, or I would do a YouTube video or something like that. So it's about understanding, as our circumstances change, as we age, how we meet our needs is going to change, but we have to recognize that. When we're out of balance, we feel uncomfortable in our own skin. Yeah. When we're in balance, it's not about being perfect. It's just recognizing that we have all of these different needs, and they're going to change with age and circumstances and all of that kind of stuff. And that's I call it the art of balance, and it's something we do for the rest of our lives. And again, you can see this isn't something that's particular for someone who has an alcohol problem. This is a personal development pillar that everybody needs to do.
100%. And I hear so much, because we love living on the ends of the spectrum of all or nothing. And I always remind people there's so many options in the middle. And I refer to this as structured flexibility. So it's knowing the direction you want to travel and recognizing that that's the structure. The structure is the direction. But the flexibility is that in order to keep traveling that direction, we've got to be willing to change, like you said, what self-care looks like. All right. So the pillars we've covered so far are movement, connection, and balance. What are the last 2?
So the last 2, Courtney, are process and growth. So process is about really understanding how our past shows up in our present. We can't escape that. We are all shaped by our childhoods, the things that happen to us, and they show up every day in our lives. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it can be. Sure. We have patterns, we have attachment issues, we have limiting beliefs from that were formed many years ago. So process work is about really understanding ourselves. It's about revealing ourselves to ourselves so we can know who we really are, why we feel the way we do, why we act the way we do, why we have the responses the way we do. And this can be done in many ways. It can be done with a therapist. It can be done in a group program. It can be done with coaching. It can be done with journaling. There's lots of ways that we can understand ourselves. We really, that's a key pivotal part, I think, of being human, is really knowing yourself. And then the last pillar is growth. We all of us are being called to grow. We're all being called to grow in many different ways. Growth is a universal law of life. If you look around, you will see that's true in nature, in humans, in businesses, in communities. If we're not growing, we're dying. We have to grow. But the thing with growth is we will always meet fear and resistance, because growing into a new place, growing into, doing a new thing. And there's nothing more than sobriety, that the land of sober is a new, unknown place. We don't know. How do we navigate everything sober? How do we do weekends and parties and all that kind of stuff? So we're always going to meet some fear and resistance. Yeah. And we just have to, it's really skills that we haven't learned. I would stay in a holding pattern because I couldn't grow out of the box that I was in because I was too scared. Once I understood what was happening and I understood how to navigate through fear and resistance and grow anyway, things began to change. But we have to honor that call to growth, and that will happen when we get sober.
Absolutely. And sobriety it's such an identity shift, right? Like behavior change really is identity change.
Yes.
And I think that there is a period of time where it feels we're so disoriented because we've never been this version of ourselves before, or it's been a really long time since we've been there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first year I won't sugarcoat it. It's weird.
Yeah.
It is like, I was 27 and I was like, I just couldn't imagine, like, how do you do these things sober? Like just from a Saturday night to a wedding to Christmas. And so the first time was kind of strange because drinking was so ingrained with so many different events. It was very hard to conceive that these things were possible sober, A, and B, like that they could be enjoyable or fun or any of those things. But, after 21 years of doing it, I've done all the things and they're all better sober. I've done everything and I've had way more fun. The connection is better. I've danced, I've partied, I've socialized, all of that. But I had to go through that kind of bumpy, like, first time. It was a bit frightening to get to that place. And that's really what I help people with is getting, it is bumpy at the beginning and we need community and we need someone to help us so we can get to this new land. And then it just becomes our new normal. It's just our new normal. That's all
Absolutely.
it is.
And all the pillars you mentioned, it's so interesting because I can see our relationship with alcohol being a barrier to all of those things. When we're drinking, we don't want to move. We don't want to pursue that. We don't have the resources to pursue balance. We aren't interested in growth, right? Because we aren't making time for it. We don't feel good enough to pursue it. So I love these pillars. Is there a particular order to these pillars, like that in the way that you teach them?
I always say that they all kind of work together, but when someone is brand new, I just say focus on the first two, movement and connection. Just start moving your body. You will feel better. Like Garrett is a guarantee. If you just start walking most days, you're going to feel better within a month. Yeah. And the connection bit, you have to have having community, having people around you who know what the struggle is like, what you're going through, can give you advice and support. Those two are essential. And the rest kind of will come naturally. Okay.
So let's tell listeners about the book because the book is coming out, or at the time of this, it may be out. We're doing this at the end of January. So tell us about the book and where do people find it?
So Soberful, the book, it's out everywhere that you can buy books. And it's really, it's the program. So it's for people who are questioning their relationship with alcohol and want to stop, but maybe they've started a lot and they want the how. It's the not just how do I stop drinking? How do I stop drinking and be happy and comfortable in my own skin and satisfied? And how do I change my life in the absence of alcohol? So it lays out the 5 pillars. It lays out the program. There's lots of journaling prompts all the way through to kind of get you thinking and kind of helping you work all of the pillars. So the book lays out the 5 pillars and the first part of it really kind of deconstructs and challenges this relationship with alcohol that we have so we can see it differently.
Yeah. And it's really a kind of a nice overview of the type of work that you do inside of your private community, correct?
Yes, it is. It's the work. It's the work of sobriety. It's how to have boundaries, how to have balance, how to change our limiting beliefs, how to deal with fear, what to tell other people when you've stopped drinking. It's all of the answers are in there.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
No, I think that's it, Courtney. I love your work, and I'm so grateful to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me and helping me spread the word that a soberful life could be an amazing life.
Oh, I'm so excited it's out in the world, and I know listeners will appreciate it immensely. I'm sure they'll appreciate this podcast, but if you like the podcast, if it's resonating with you, go out and get the book because it's all in there. All right, my friend, thank you so much for being here, and hopefully our paths will cross again soon.
Thank you so much, Courtney.